I am Miro Nieminen, and why am I here today is that Yka and Matthias from our office asked that is there anyone who would like to come to Munich and have a presentation in one of our meetups. And this is like my first time having a presentation in a public meetup. I've done a couple of these, internal ones that we have every Friday, but this is the first time doing it publicly, and I have to admit that this was only for the opportunity to come to see the Munich because I've never been here, but it's been really nice so far. And I'm hailing from Tampere, and I'm a bit biased to say, of course, but I honestly believe it's one of our finest offices. We are located straight under that Tampella sign. It's a traditional Finnish factory scenery. It's like a brand new office we just moved in. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about our best practices from 1 year of React Redux. This was the title that I came up when I tested this talk in our internal meetup, and Yka was there to check that am I good enough to come here and present it to you. But I kind of evolved it a little bit during from when I first did this. I changed it to our project structure from 1 year of React Redux, but that didn't sound right. So this will be my final title, how we evolved during 1 year of React Redux. And a bit of expectation management, that I already said that this is this is my first public talk, and the product that I'm talking about is that if you exclude the opportunity that I utilized the Spice program, I created a hobby project for money for the React Redux stack, but this was first time that I used React Redux with the actual customer project. So I don't have that much experience about this, so please, after the talk, please come and challenge me if you notice something that you have done better or you didn't understand or kind of seemed wrong. For the executive summaries, because all the executives are really into the latest JavaScript hype trends, this talk is about what we delivered and what we learned during our 12-month stint in the customer project. So our team was 3 to 4 front-end developers and about 6 back-end developers, and I was kind of in the middle. I was when we were sold to the project, I was a purely front-end guy, but I kind of transited to the back-end because they weren't delivering fast enough, so it kind of locked us down. But in the end, during the 12 months, I touched every module of the project besides the Android client that we also had on this one. And in the end, in the front end, we had about 65 klogs of code. We had one platform module that contained kind of core logic that I will come back later on. And then on that platform, we made 2 web applications on top of it. And some of the the key tech we used of naturally React Redux, then Immutable.js for styles. We had CSS modules with SAS add-on. We built it with Webpack, and we heavily utilized HighCharge and HighStore. The project was about kind of IoT thing on a domain where there is lots of time series data. And we had some limiting factors, and I'm telling you these because these will give you some kind of context why we made the decisions that we made. One thing was that from the customer's request, the backend was really simplistic. It gave the basic things, but it didn't combine anything, and we had to do all of those. If for example, if you would have if there are entities that are linked together semantically, we will need to do that on the front end because the driver for the backend was generic IoT platform, so they didn't want anything application specific in there. And then there was this mission critical stuff, operational requirement, Well, it actually wasn't that heavily, but I kind of love space stuff and mission critical stuff always sounds so good. So I wanted to put in there, but basically like if our system would fail, no one would die, but if our system would fail, it would also fail, it could fail to save a human life. So there was some stakes on the play, and we had, besides that backend team and frontend team, we had a really large testing team to ensure that we don't mess things up. And then there were privacy requirements. This picture has nothing to do with it, but I also love Jurassic Park, so this was one occasion how I'm gonna squeeze it into the presentation. We had this requirement for the client that we had to keep things that could identify people separate from the actual measurement data of the people. And that's also one of the reasons why the APIs were so simplistic, that they gave you kind of like the essential things that the system stored within these databases, and you had to combine them yourself on the front end because of the domain limitation that we had. So where we started from 12 months ago, we started from where every web developer in 2016 started. We started doing stuff whatever Dan Abramov says to do. So our first project structure was the real world example of React Redux. So you had actions and components and containers and whatever Dan Abramov says to do. Then like sum it up with Redux, actions, containers, components. And this, like for the first few months, it worked really well. Like it didn't slow us down. We were just hacking stuff together, and no one died, and we were able to deliver stuff. And then one more senior developer joined our team, and he started to push this Redux duck model to our project. At that point, we didn't even know what it was, but if we at start had Redux, actions, containers, and components, we combined them in a way that we have these ducks that contain those Reduxes, sorry if my spelling is totally wrong, action types and action creators. Then we have the containers, then we have the components and other mandatory Redux stuff. You have like middleware and store and whatnot. So this was a good thing. This was first time I heard about this duck thing, and it kind of like it made the development a bit easier because you had less files. It was easier to manage and kind of like easier to get the mental image about what we were doing to your head. So this was like a good step forward. But some time passed and we like massed in more features, and we got this feeling that okay, maybe this is not the final solution that we can use for the project structure. There were some we got these concerns about. I'll show you some code in a bit. Like okay, we did stuff in this way, and it really can't be right. So one of the first things was that, as I said, our backend was really simplistic, so we had to do several fetches and combine them together. And we had those two web applications from the start. They were quite similar, but not like exactly similar. They were for different user groups. But we ended up having lots of these API call things and mashing up them together between both of the apps. And it was starting to get real messy to handle. Like if there were some changes to the APIs, it was hard to kind of like make it work again and test it properly. And if you jump to the code that somebody else had just recently edited, it was kind of hard to get a grasp on like what you should do. And more importantly, our lifecycle loop functions like these, they started to get really hard to understand, like why there are these kind of things in these. They were really complicated to test, and this was the point that we started to feel that okay, we are not using this Redux technology in a way that it should be utilized properly. And maybe like as a final nail to the coffin, as I said, we were using high charts heavily, so we had these kind of hacks for the components that used high charts, like should the component update, and then there is like loads of things that even though we tried to kind of like comment them, if you came back to, if you got some kind of like bug report that okay, this chart is not showing data correctly, and you came back at this, you really needed to grab the developer who had recently touched it and start going through like why have you done these things, why are these important, what I can change, and like how to properly test this. It was a really like loads of work, so not a good thing. But we kind of like solved this in a way, and actually I'm a bit proud about what we did, but I'm hoping that after this talk and when we have more beer and pizza, someone of you will tell me even more better ways to do it, because this I'm pretty sure that this isn't like the finest solution that you can do on a Redux project. But as most of the things in software development and computer science, we came up with something that was already invented. So basically what we did was the model VA model pattern, and I'm not sure if it's from Microsoft originally, but that's what they were posting a lot in one point. So these pictures are loaned from Microsoft. So if you think about this, I will soon scrap this and go from the start, like how we change our docs to this. But if you think about this diagram, you will have the view would be the React component, and then there would be the ways how you structure your data from the APIs and kind of like get it to that React component. But because as I said, I'm a bit proud of this, I'm going to present it to you as our awesome to the max golden bullet architecture for Redux projects. And it starts from, like, naming things is really hard, and I couldn't pick the names that Microsoft had already picked, so we start with this thing called core concept. And this is what you would call the model from the Microsoft thing. But the core concept would have all the interactions towards your API. It would have the functionalities of that Redux doc, and it would store the original responses, and most importantly, it will create a layer between the store, like the store of this core concept, and your other components and views. Like it would have like a get layer around the store. So if you would need some data from the store of this core concept, you would obtain it via function. You would never go through you would never like directly go to the store object, the state object, and pick it. Then there is the view concept, which is basically the same as the core concept, but it doesn't have any direct API calls. So if the view concept needs something from the API, it utilizes the previous core concepts and kind of like combines the functionalities of the core concepts together. And it's in our project, it usually was owned by some view on the app. Like we made them especially from some specific view on the app. And if you would have similar kind of API that we had, that was kind of like simplistic, and if you, for example, want to create a user, in our case it required 4 API calls for different endpoints. This would be the place where you have that business logic, that how do you actually combine those simplistic API actions to something meaningful that the user does in your application. And then built on top of these are the standard Redux themes, kind of like the containers and the components. And containers might utilize the view concept if it's like that complicated container that it requires complicated logic. It would have in our model, it would have a dedicated view concept which combines the functionalities of core concept, and it only declares what data it wants and what action does it want to trigger. So on the containers you would have no getters to the state, but instead you would use the selector functions from some of these concepts that you give the selector function the state, and it will, the concept itself would determine how to fit the data you want from the state to the container. If this was the thing that we were at when we recruited this senior developer, it started to morph in the solution where instead of ducks we have these core concepts. They are all the same that the ducks were, but they have this new thing that they encapsulate the state and create these getter functions, and we state that all the API interactions are done inside the core concepts. And then between the core concept and containers, we might have this optional view concept layer, that if you have a complicated container, you would create a view concept for it, combine the functionalities for the core concept, and from the viewpoint of the container, you will just have this a bit more simplified API. You will, if this will be the container for creating the user, it wouldn't need to know that you need to do 4 API calls to create the user. In the view concept of that Redux container, there would be just the create user action creator. It would mask that stuff together from various core concepts, and this would only need to know that I just want to create user and give the data that I want to give to that user. And one of the key things on this one, because you know that in Redux, it's the why we were using immutable JS, and perhaps why you are using immutable JS, is that you don't want to get the performance loss for the comparison things that you are creating new objects or new functions. And even when you give a talk to that thing, you might accidentally do it, because the avoiding those unnecessary render loops is hard. That's why it's important that for these state selectors, we utilize the reselect library, which gives us the possibility to create these selectors that you give them functions, and then you give them a lambda function that gets the result of those functions. So now when this is called, if we first call this in a state that is like the value 1 is 2 and value 1 is 3, then the first time it goes to this lambda function and it does the calculation about what's the actual result. But after that, if you call it again, then it has a cache inside it. So if it gets called again with the same parameters, it already has the answer for it. So there would be, you can avoid unnecessary computation call for this lambda function. Like in this Mickey Mouse example, it doesn't matter because it's G. But when you start to, this is a screenshot from the reselect library's documentation. When you start to combine those selectors, if you have an API like we had, which is it's simplistic, you have to all the time combine stuff, then this gives you a little bit of shield towards if you actually mess something up, because it's really hard. It's really easy to mess something up and do useless renders. So the cache of the reselect library gives you a little bit of breathing space for this problem. So this code snippet could be, even though I said it from the documentation of the reselect library, it could be a code from the view concept. Like these selector functions could be something as simplistic as these are inside our core concept, but then in the view concept we would combine them and we would give this kind of simplistic API for our containers. So this code would go in the React container. So if you want to have the user ID, you just have the get selected user ID selector, which is a reselect selector, and the same goes for other functions. And this was we felt that this was really good. it helped us a lot on that you would more easily jump to a code of another developer, because we had these building blocks towards our API. Then we had this middle layer, the view concept layer, where these building blocks are utilized, and they were easier to test, and if something changed, it wasn't that bad. Like, you didn't need to do that, like grab the guy or gal who wrote the kind of like that first horrible hack and like, okay, I need to change it, please guide me how to go through this. And this kind of like leads us to the point like code sharing between multiple React apps. And as I said, we had 2 React apps, and we had this platform module for it. And it's kind of like we were able to pull it off. Like, when we started with those really long API call chains, we were able to convert them into those core concept building blocks, and then create the view concepts built from these core concept blocks. And our platform thing, I'm kind of like trying to do, ironically, the platform thing, because me and Ykä and Futurice is from the land of Nokia, and they were really good at these platform stuff. They were always doing the platforms, and in the end it was the burning platform. I never got like anything out of it. But our platform was quite okay. So it was just an NPM module that both of the web applications used, and it was filled with these core concepts with interacting with our API. And one of my pipe dreams as a beginner React Native developer is that could we somehow share the code between React app and React Native app? And with this kind of approach, I would say that it's plausible. It will be hard, like especially if you have different teams doing the React Native app and the React app. It's kind of like you have to constantly communicate about what's happening in your platform NPM library. That if you are going to do breaking changes, then eventually the other team needs to adapt them into their app. But it's doable, and after that I heard some rumors about what if the React app also will kind of like target not the DOM but Canvas or something, and you will be able to share also the view layer of React and React Native app, but that's a different story. Then to the end, random things that I will take with me from this 12-month project to a new React Redux project. Definitely, I enjoyed the React Redux a lot. I'm not that kind of guy who likes to jump on the new technology, so I'm always a bit of late adapter. But currently, I feel that I've gotten to a point that the productivity of my React Redux development is quite okay. That's all, folks. Thanks for your patience.